Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as the Lost. This daily is very special, and that's because I might be rank 1 when I upload it. I obviously don't know this yet because I can't see into the future, but at the time of the recording I was rank 1. It actually looked pretty promising. I at least hope for a top 3 finish, so I'm not exactly sure, but I'm just kind of pointing this out. If you're watching this video because I'm rank 1, this is something that doesn't usually happen, and the main reason for that is I usually don't try to go out of my way to break the game. But in this particular case, a lot of things went right. I made some risky decisions which managed to pay off, and I was lucky enough to actually manage to rank well. And for that reason, I would like to explain you to my thought process, what exactly was going on, and maybe some of the decisions that influenced my other decisions that led to me being in a relatively good spot, especially in the hard daily like the Lost one. So what do we have here? Obviously you see me picking up the wig, Mom's wig, and the Roid Rage, and both of those are great items on their own because obviously they provide spiders, or they give you speed or range, and that's all good, but they're not something I would call really powerful items. As the Lost, you tend to want a really strong items that will carry you through the run. You essentially want something so powerful that there's no chance of anything stopping you. You want to one-shot enemies, you want to one-shot bosses, and you don't want anything to stand in your way, because the least damage you do, the less damage you do, the more influential or the more chances enemies have to hit you, and because you only have 2 hits of damage, that can be quite problematic. Especially in daily runs, it's very important for you to get to the Hush objectives and to the boss rush objectives, and in there, just because of how large the rooms are, you really don't have the chance to quit, come back and refresh your Holy Mantle, so you really need to focus, or at least you need some other way of getting safe. Maybe the most common way of doing this is just to find a respawn item, respawn as Dark Judas, or basically as any character which can have health, and when you do that, you can go back in there. Of course, that you can afford to get hit a few times, and even if you do, it's still a net positive, or at least a net gain, because while you do lose points from getting damage, you still get points for beating boss rush or the Hush or whatever. But that's not all. Obviously, there are some other ways of going about this, and I know that I've done this a few times in the past, and it's usually just kind of focusing on the items at hand. So you try to have as many good items as possible. For example, let's imagine that if you had the Brimstone, and I was playing as the Lost, and maybe I found something like the Lump of Coal. The Lump of Coal and Brimstone are actually very good potent combos, because they allow you to mostly one-shot enemies in boss rush, so that's a pretty good deal. And against Hush, it's also relatively decent, but obviously you have some other problems there. But there are other ways of going about it than just getting health. For example, you might try to do something like the Blank card and the Algiz Rune, or maybe you'll try to get a deck of cards or the starter deck and 2 Algiz Rune and try to maybe stay safe that way. Obviously, that's also maybe a bit more unlikely than the first option of just respawning, especially because with the D4, you can force certain respawn items to appear, or at least not force, make them more likely to appear, and then use them to your advantage, but making other runes or cards or whatever spawn is obviously much less likely. For that reason, it's not usually a strategy that I would say is my go-to when I'm trying to beat the Lost dailies. But I would say that, as in any or most Lost dailies, there's always that element of luck, because not only do you need to pick up enough items before you start rerolling, first of all, you need a lot of batteries on the ground so you can actually start rerolling your items into hopefully better ones, and even then you have a very high chance of screwing yourself, because there's always a chance of you getting something like the Marked and the Ipecac, and that would just end up killing you on the spot, and there's nothing really you can do about it. So you need a lot of batteries on the ground, and you need a lot of D4 charges, and not only that, you also need a way to kill yourself without inflicting too much damage penalty on your hands. And you know, using a bomb is okay, but if you can do it, maybe it's a bit of a better idea to just go to the curse room. And when you do that, it usually works in your favor, because then you can respawn, go into the curse room, you come back on the other side, and then you're a character that can suddenly have health. So like I said, it always does take some balls and some maybe luck in that sense, and I was at a point where I felt like I needed to make a choice. So I made a choice. Will I go to boss rush and will try to beat it? But for that, I really didn't feel safe enough just sticking with my loader that I had as the Lost. So I just said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna reroll the D4, and because I have another battery charge on the ground, I'll just hope to get lucky, essentially. So I rerolled once, I rerolled twice, nothing came out of it, but luckily on the next floor, so on the Mom floor, I did reroll again, I got the Lazarus 2, and then I respawned with health, and now when I have 2 spirit cards and 1 red card, and of course I also have the Blank card, which I just luckily got with the Chariot, I'm in a pretty good spot, at least health-wise. I'm not too kind of afraid of dying, but also you can see that my damage is 52. So not only did we manage to respawn and get into a position where we have more health, we also managed to respawn into a position where we're essentially one-shotting most enemies. So we're in a really good spot from now. So what else is there? Obviously, this is maybe, I would say, the first step of the equation. The second one is just trying to beat boss rush and get to harsh in time, and that's not much different than the usual daily, so I won't really go into that too much, but obviously we want to minimize damage from this point on, because suddenly now we can take damage, we have the Holy Mantle, we're much more at the risk of losing all of it to damage penalty, because up until this point I only managed to got hit twice, and that was in boss rush, which isn't too unlikely, and I would say not too catastrophic, just because I would imagine most people would either end up getting hit as well, or just end up dying, because a lot of people do try to do boss rush as the lost. I tend to not do that because I feel like the risk is too high, and you never know if it's going to be a champion variant of boss rush, and if that happens, then there's nothing you can do, in my opinion. Sometimes you're going to end up getting the waves that you just can't avoid, even if you're the best player at the game, and you're going to end up dying, and that's a bummer, obviously. So for that reason, I'd rather not risk it, because I feel like just making it one stage more, or one stage further, which is just as easy as just going into that crawl space, then it's gonna just net you more points than the people who've tried to go to boss rush but ended up tragically dying because they thought they could do it, but it turned out that they couldn't. So for that reason, I do maybe go for a bit of a chicken route, but the one that would, I'd say, maximize my chances. So that was also the reason why I decided to take the D4 there, because I wanted to do boss rush, I wanted to do harsh, but I knew that I couldn't do it, or at least that I wouldn't be comfortable doing it unless I had some help to go with that. So now that we got back, we have obviously a lot of damage. Polyphemus is great. We also have the Dead Shot or Dead Eye, which doubles your damage for the more accurate shots you are. So now suddenly we have 87 damage with Dark Judas. It just leaves us in a really good spot. What's maybe the luckiest about all of this is that I picked up a very certain select number of items before I started rerolling, and if I picked up a different amount, it could have ended up really catastrophically, because you can see in this case we got the blank card, we have Polyphemus, we have Deadshot, and we also have the Yara rune because we have the rune bag. So all of these items work really well in tandem with each other, because they essentially allow us to not only break the game, but they allow us to be much more safe and just break the game. I guess that's really the main point that I'm trying to make here. But also, we're very strong because of it. But you can imagine that if I picked up less items, like maybe even 2 less items, then maybe I would have gotten Deadshot and Polyphemus, but I wouldn't get the rune bag, which means that I wouldn't be guaranteed to get a Yara rune. So for that reason, I would end up in a position where I couldn't break the game further. I couldn't, of course, get a lot of Shrek bonus because I wouldn't have the Yara rune, or maybe I wouldn't even get it on the Void. Obviously, there's always a chance of just finding one in nature, but having the rune bag on the Void floor, just because of how many rooms there are, increases that chance to pretty much guaranteed, in my opinion. So you can imagine if I just took 1 less item or maybe 2 less items, I wouldn't have been guaranteed to get any of those items, and this breaking potential wouldn't really turn out well. So that's what I meant when I say that this is maybe more about luck than necessarily skill, but obviously some of skill also goes into effect here. And I like this kind of dailies where it's really more about knowledge and how you can utilize the things that you have to your advantage. And maybe you make a risky decision, but it's a calculated one, and for that reason, when it does work, it tends to be very rewarding. So in this case, I'm really glad that this worked out, because I can imagine this going badly in about a million ways, and I do imagine it did go badly in a million ways for other players. But from now on, it's just happy cruising. We have the Yara rune, we have a battery charge, we have the judgment card, so there's nothing to worry about now. So the first thing, or the first order of business for me, first is just to explore the entirety of the floor, try to go to those bosses which I know are in Delirium and beat them, and at the end I'll try to get a Forget Me Now, and when I do that, I'll try to go visit another bosses, and if one of them happens to be Delirium, I'm just gonna use the Forget Me Now in that position and restart the whole Void floor again, because obviously I don't want to be fighting him, he's a bit too tough, I feel like I would be taking too much damage. So that's exactly what I did. I used the Yara rune and the blank card to duplicate the consumables. I duplicated all 3 of them because I wanted to max them out to 99, and it just happened to be that way, so I wasn't really too worried about that. Then what you do is you take the judgment cards and you just essentially start duplicating them, and you just spawn a bunch of them in a secret room. It's very important that it's in a secret room, because what you want to do is essentially give them enough money or health or whatever to get item payouts, and then you just start re-rolling. Ideally, you would want to pick up the active items, because a lot of them are books. They can give you the bookworm transformation or maybe something else, but I didn't bother because I figured it's not really necessary. I just rerolled essentially because until one of them became the Forget Me Now. And why that works in the secret room is because the secret room item pool is very limited. It doesn't have a lot of items in it. So having something like, I think it has something like 23 or maybe a bit more items. So having 4 items and then rerolling them 7 times, you can imagine that pretty much makes it guaranteed that you're gonna find the item that you're looking for. And the secret room pool actually actually has a ton of really good items that allow you for breaking. So one of them is a blank card, we already have that, and the other one is Forget Me Now, and they're basically the recipe for how to win or how to get a good score on the daily. So as soon as I get to Forget Me Now, I go visit the other boss rooms. I notice that there's only one left, which means that must be Delirium. So instead of just going there, I use it and I start exploring the entirety of the floor again. You can see that I'm the 54,000 point mark now, but maybe what I didn't really look forward to is that a lot of these rooms ended up being a real pain in the butt. I still got points in average, so I didn't lose points by using the Forget Me Now, but my score could have been even higher. I would say something like 500 points, maybe even a bit more higher, if I were just a bit more careful. I mean, some damage I really couldn't have avoided because I have Samson's chains, and as soon as I entered the room in certain direction, there was the bomb rock exploded, and that one full heart of damage to me, and that's like 300 or 400 points. But also some bosses were a bit annoying. I'm glad that I didn't take damage against Satan. I usually have a lot of problems against him just because of his 3-stage phases. A lot of his attacks are very localized, so to say, and if you move too fast, or at least if I move too fast, I'm really bad at dodging them, because then my velocity kind of pushes me into some of his other bullets, and it just ends up in a scenario where I can't do that much. But I'm glad that I did get through it, and you can see that I'm actually nearing at the end here. I'll have the same strategy here. I'll try to get to as many boss rooms as possible. I only have 2 left, and if one of them turns out to be Delirium, I would use the full card to go back. I'll go to the other one, beat it, and then just quit. You know, I usually try to fight Delirium. I would say usually, but sometimes I do try to find Delirium, especially if I have a really strong like this one. But I felt like this is a really good contender for the top 3 spot, so instead of going there and kind of bashing my head against the wall, I just figured I'm gonna stop now, I'm gonna exit the run and see where this lands me. You can see that my score is 6th, but if you take out the cheaters, or at least look on the Greedbot leaderboards, I end up being 1st, or at least at the time of this recording, so I have that for myself. I don't know what my rank will be tomorrow. Hopefully it's at least top 3, but obviously if I do remain 1st, that's going to be really exciting. What's maybe another good thing about this is that my time penalty is also relatively low, which I didn't expect at all. I'm just naturally a very slow player, so for me to see my time penalty be in the top 200s is actually also very exciting. So overall, a lot of exploration bonus, a lot of Shrek bonus. We basically did everything that we had to do. The only problem here is just us taking a little bit too much damage, but at least that can be avoided, or at least justified in some ways. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.